Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us somewhere both familiar and strange, into something you feel every moment but can never quite hold, something that ticks softly on your wrist and yet might not be moving at all. We're going to drift into time, but not the time you plan or schedule. Not the one you check on your phone or hang on the wall. Not even the one you feel slipping away on a Sunday evening. No, tonight we'll explore a far stranger version of time. The idea that it might not flow at all. That maybe, just maybe, every moment of your life already exists. Your first breath, your last conversation, the quiet cup of tea you had on a rainy afternoon 5 years ago, the strange dream you'll have next week. All of it. Still there, still waiting, still real, fixed, like stars in a frozen sky. But before we settle in and get cozy, I'd love if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you truly find these quiet explorations enjoyable. And when you're ready, leave a comment to let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always such a joy to see all the places we gather from, each in our own little slice of time. Now feel free to dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a soft background hum, and let's gently begin our journey into the nature of time itself. And if your mind begins to wander, that's perfectly fine. Let it drift. We'll still be here, quietly unfolding the story. So, let's begin not with clocks or equations, but with something simpler, a feeling. You probably think of time like a river, flowing forward, never stopping, never turning back. We speak of time that way all the time. Time flows, time marches on. You can't step in the same river twice. We imagine ourselves floating downstream, each moment drifting into the next like autumn leaves on a slow current. It's a comforting picture, and a persuasive one. After all, we feel time passing. We age. We remember the past but never the future. We wake up, we move through the day, and we fall asleep. Over and over, always forward, never in reverse. But here's where things begin to ripple. Physics, the quiet whisperer of nature's deepest truths, suggests that time might not be so simple, that the river we think we're floating through may not be flowing at all. The first cracks in the river metaphor came from a gentle but persistent question. What is time, really? Is it something that exists on its own, ticking in the background like a cosmic metronome? Or is it something woven into space, tangled with matter and motion? For centuries, time was treated like an invisible stage on which the universe performs. Newton, brilliant and orderly, imagined absolute time, steady, universal, unchanging, a divine clock ticking behind the scenes. No matter where you were or what you were doing, time would keep moving at the same rate, indifferent to your speed or surroundings. But then came Einstein. Soft-spoken, curious, often lost in thought, Einstein proposed something much stranger and far more beautiful. He showed that time does not tick independently. It bends, it stretches, it can slow down or speed up, depending on how fast you move or how close you are to something heavy. To someone in a spaceship racing through the cosmos, time flows more slowly than it does for someone waiting on a park bench. Not metaphorically, actually, and if that ship flew near a black hole, it would be even more extreme. For the traveller, only a few minutes might pass, but for the person on the bench, years. Suddenly, time wasn't a river at all. It was more like a fabric, a soft, elastic sheet that could be pulled and twisted by mass and motion. And if time could stretch, then what did that say about its flow? Is there really a now that's the same for everyone? Einstein's answer, delivered quietly but with cosmic consequences, was no. There is no universal now. Your now is not my now. Not for a moving train, not for a satellite in orbit, not for a photon dancing across the galaxy. And if there's no shared now, then what is time really doing? Some physicists and some philosophers took that question seriously. What if time doesn't move at all? What if instead all of time already exists, past, present, future, all at once? Like a loaf of bread, each moment a slice, or a book, where all pages are written, whether you've turned to them or not. This idea, known as the block universe, is not science fiction. It's a serious interpretation of Einstein's theories. In this view, you're not a person moving through time. You are a four-dimensional being stretched across time, like a mountain stretched across height and width. The you who is 5 years old, blowing out birthday candles, that version of you is still there. Still just as real as the you listening right now. And the version of you decades from now sipping tea or watching stars, that one's there too. You don't go through time. You are time. It's a strange idea. Maybe even a little unsettling. But also, there's something quieting about it. Something still. Because if it's true, if your life is not a river but a sculpture, then you've never lost anything. No moment is truly gone. Every goodbye, every kiss, every laugh, every quiet walk is still etched into the shape of you. Time, in that sense, is not something that slips away. It's something you carry, always. So tonight we'll take our time exploring this strange idea. We'll begin with what we think time is. Then we'll follow the arrow it draws through the world. We'll watch how entropy and memory shape its rhythm. We'll slip near black holes where time frays and slows, and we'll listen to dreams and brains and clocks and stars until we reach the still centre of the block. But don't worry, we're not in a rush. The stars will wait for us. Because maybe, just maybe, they already have. If I asked you to tell me what time is, you might instinctively glance at a clock. It's 10:42, you'd say, or 6:15. Or maybe you'd check your phone, as we so often do, looking for the little digits that keep our lives moving in scheduled precision. But is that really time? Or is that just how we've chosen to measure it? Chop it into hours and minutes, turn it into calendar grids and alarm chimes? What if time isn't the ticking of numbers at all, but a feeling, a rhythm, something much softer, closer to your breath than to your watch? Let's take a moment to unfasten ourselves from the clock, because tonight, before we even try to understand what time is, we'll wander through the many ways we experience it. There is the time we measure, the objective, cold, universal kind, the kind engineers use, the kind your oven blinks, the kind that syncs satellites and schedules trains. And then there's the time you live, the time you feel, that strange, slanted, unpredictable version of time that makes a minute feel eternal when you're stuck in traffic, and makes 2 hours vanish in the blink of an eye when you're walking through a golden autumn park with someone you love. Ancient Greeks had 2 words for this, chronos and kairos. Chronos is the time of clocks, linear, sequential, measured. It's the time that ages you, the time that turns babies into grandparents, the time that can be cut, budgeted and stored in calendars. Kairos, on the other hand, is the time of meaning, of presence, of experience. It is not counted. It is felt. You don't ask what time it is when you're laughing so hard your cheeks ache. That's kairos. The right moment. The perfect pause between words. The slow unfolding of now. Both are real. But only one fits neatly on a clock face. Listen to how we speak about time. Even without realizing it, we give it shape and weight and purpose. We say time is running out. We waste time, save time, borrow time, spend it. We complain there's never enough of it. We kill it when we're bored, and yet, in our better moments, we cherish it. We say, I had the best time, or that was time well spent. These aren't just metaphors, they're emotional maps, ways we try to capture a force we can't touch, but which quietly touches everything we do. Think of the time in your body, not your wristwatch, your breath. Inhale, exhale, exhale, That's time. Not a number, but a rhythm, a pulse. Your heartbeat too knows time, not as seconds but as a wave. It speeds up when you run, slows when you're still. If you were to sit quietly in a field, eyes closed, ears open, you'd feel a different kind of clock ticking. One made of wind and breath, and the slow movements of your body settling into calm. Footsteps on a gravel road, the dripping of a faucet, the clink of a spoon in tea. These are all quiet clocks, each counting time in its own soft dialect. Our ancestors didn't have digital timers or atomic clocks, but they knew time just the same. They saw it in the shifting light of morning, in the blooming of plants, in the phases of the moon, the waxing crescent, the full moon, the final sliver. These were the months before there were months. Days were told by shadows and stars, seasons by scent and harvest. A child waiting for spring knew the patience of time. A farmer watching clouds over the field understood its pace. There's something gentle about that, isn't there? Before we divided time into boxes and boxes into hours, time was something we moved inside, like waves or weather. Even now, long after we've invented wristwatches and Google calendars, you still feel those old rhythms, maybe not consciously, but somewhere deep beneath your daily plans. You feel it when dusk makes you quiet, when a rainy afternoon slows your thoughts, when a sunny morning pulls you to open the curtains just a little wider. Time is not only measured, it is sensed, and that sensation changes, moment to moment, mood to mood. There's the time of routines, brushing your teeth, making tea, folding laundry, the time of repetition, steady, reassuring, a kind of rhythmic lullaby to daily life. Then there's waiting time, a doctor's office, a microwave, a traffic light that refuses to turn green, each second stretched like taffy. You glance at the clock and are sure 5 minutes have passed, only to see that it's been one. Contrast that with what we might call flow time. When you're so immersed in something, drawing, playing music, baking bread, that the clock disappears entirely. Hours pass unnoticed. The world narrows into focus. That too is time. But it isn't linear. It isn't polite. It bends around your attention, reshaping itself to your involvement. And of course, there's memory time. The past doesn't live on a calendar. It lives in you. A childhood birthday, a first kiss, a quiet walk through snow. These memories aren't simply recalled, they're relived. Your brain doesn't replay them like film, it reactivates the emotions, the sights, the smells. You don't remember in numbers, you remember in texture. And that's what makes time so slippery, because the clock says it's 10:57 p.m, but your mind might be standing in a school hallway in 2003, or floating in a dream that hasn't even begun yet. Time, then, is not one thing. It is many. It is chronos and kairos. It is ticking and breathing. It is the moment you are in and the moment your thoughts wander to. It is routine and rhythm and rupture. It is what you follow and what you feel. And before we try to measure it, fix it, or question whether it flows, we must simply acknowledge that we carry many clocks inside us, and none of them ever tick quite the same way. Now that we've wandered through the emotional landscape of time, the kind you feel in your bones, in your breath, and in your memories, it's time to shift our gaze outward, gently, toward the version of time that physics paints, a version that doesn't always match how it feels, a version built not on sensation, but on equations, experiments, and the soft whisper of starlight. This kind of time doesn't ask how you feel. It simply exists. Or, perhaps, it doesn't exist the way we think it does at all. For centuries, the question, what is time, had a simple answer. It was the great invisible ruler, always present, always ticking, unchanging and absolute. That was how Isaac Newton saw it, and for his time, it worked beautifully. Newton imagined time as a kind of background grid. a universal drumbeat. It ticked the same for everyone, everywhere, always. A second on the moon was the same as a second in London. Time, like space, was fixed, a great divine clock set into motion. But then came the 20th century, and with it, a quiet revolution. In 1905, a young patent clerk named Albert Einstein published a paper on what he called special relativity. It was soft in tone, but it would change how we see time forever. He proposed something both simple and shocking. Time is not absolute. It doesn't tick the same for everyone. Instead, time is relative, shaped by how fast you're moving. The faster you go, the slower time moves for you. Let that linger for a moment, because it's not just a trick of the senses, it's not illusion, it's physical reality. Time itself stretches and contracts depending on your speed. A fast-moving object ages more slowly than a still one. If you were to board a spaceship and accelerate to nearly the speed of light, something very strange would happen. For you, only a few minutes might pass. But for your friends on Earth, weeks, years, even centuries could unfold. You'd return home to find that while you've hardly aged, the world you left has long moved on. That's not fiction. That's physics. This isn't just theory. It's been tested. In the 1970s, scientists conducted a now famous experiment called the Fehl-Keating experiment. They placed ultra-precise atomic clocks on commercial airplanes and flew them around the world. Meanwhile, identical clocks remained on the ground. When the flights returned, the clocks were no longer in sync. The airborne clocks had ticked ever so slightly slower than their earthbound twins. Only a fraction of a second had been lost, but it was enough. Enough to prove that time had stretched. Enough to show that Einstein was right. Time moves differently depending on your motion, and that's not all. Einstein didn't stop there. In his later theory, general relativity, he added a second twist. Gravity also affects time. The stronger the gravitational pull, the slower time ticks. This too is real. Atomic clocks, placed at different altitudes, say one at sea level and one on a mountaintop, will tick at different rates. The one on the mountain, further from Earth's centre of gravity, moves a tiny bit faster. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The farther you climb, the more time opens up. Of course, the differences are minute. You won't feel them, but they matter. In fact, your phone's GPS wouldn't work properly without correcting for both of these effects. Satellites orbiting the Earth move fast and experience lower gravity. Their internal clocks tick differently than clocks on the ground. If left uncorrected, your location would drift wildly off course by several kilometres each day. But engineers account for relativity. They adjust the clocks, and because of that, you can find your way home. So next time you check your GPS, remember, it's not just triangulating your position, it's calculating relativistic time distortion. Quietly, invisibly, every moment. All of this reveals a truth so strange it almost feels dreamlike. Time, the thing we thought was constant, is malleable. It bends and warps. It's stitched into space itself. Space and time, once thought separate, are now understood as one single entity, space-time, a fabric that curves around mass and motion, a stage that isn't solid but responsive. If you were to place a heavy ball on a soft sheet, the fabric would sag. Place another ball nearby and it would roll toward the dip. That's how gravity works. Mass bends the fabric of space-time, and light and time follow the curves. Einstein showed us that the universe isn't a clock tower. It's more like a trampoline. And time, instead of marching forward like a drum beat, flows differently depending on the curves in the trampoline beneath your feet. So, here we are. We once believed time was a ruler, straight even, absolute. Now we know it's more like a soft map, one that stretches and sags depending on how we move and where we stand. And yet, as strange as all this is, it invites a deeper question. If time can bend, if it isn't the same for everyone, then what is the real, true now? Is there one? Does a universal present exist? Or are we each carrying our own private now, like candles in the dark flickering at different speeds? This question, quietly radical, will lead us deeper into mystery. Because if there's no shared now, maybe there's no flow at all. Maybe time doesn't move. Maybe we do. Imagine two twins, identical in every way, born within seconds of each other, raised in the same home, laughing at the same jokes and sharing the same birthday cake year after year. Now imagine that one of them boards a spaceship, a sleek, silver vessel capable of reaching near the speed of light, and sets off on a journey across the stars. The other twin stays home walking to work, watering the plants, listening to the quiet tick of the living room clock. Years pass, at least for the one who stayed behind. But for the twin on the ship racing through the darkness of space, time moves differently, slower, stretching like taffy. When they finally reunite, the twin from Earth is older, wrinkled, grey-haired, marked by decades of birthdays. But the one who travelled, they've barely aged at all. This is not science fiction. This is the twin paradox, a real prediction of Einstein's theory of relativity. A strange truth that reveals just how flexible time really is. The faster you move, the more time slows down for you, compared to those who remain still. And though no human has yet travelled fast enough to age this dramatically differently, we've seen it on smaller scales. In fact, we've tested it. In 1971, scientists Joseph Hafele and Richard Keating flew 4 highly accurate atomic clocks aboard commercial airliners around the world. While the planes were in motion, identical clocks remained safely on the ground. When the flights were over and the clocks were reunited, they no longer agreed. Those on the planes had experienced time just a little differently. The differences weren't large, mere nanoseconds, but they were exactly what Einstein had predicted. Time had shifted, not because of mechanical error, not because of altitude or pressure, but because of motion. And it's not just speed that warps time. Gravity plays a role too. The stronger the gravitational pull, the slower time moves. It's not metaphor, it's measurable. Imagine 2 clocks, one placed at sea level, the other high on a mountain. Over time, they drift apart. The one at higher altitude, further from the Earth's gravitational pull, ticks ever so slightly faster than the one below. In places like the International Space Station, astronauts age a bit differently than we do on Earth. Just a bit, but enough to measure. So what does this mean for us? It means that time isn't a constant ruler ticking uniformly through the cosmos. It means time is flexible, local, personal. You and I may agree that we're speaking at the same time, but depending on where we are, how fast we're moving, and how strong the gravity is around us, we're each experiencing time a little differently. Time is not absolute. It is stitched into space, bending and curving along with it. And this stitching, the fabric of space-time, is soft, responsive, sagging near massive objects like planets or stars. When you're close to something massive like Earth, time slows down compared to someone floating freely in deep space. It's almost like placing marbles on a soft blanket. If you drop a heavy ball in the centre, the blanket dips. The marbles around it roll inward, not because they're being pulled, but because the surface they sit on is curved. Mass bends the blanket. In the same way, gravity bends space-time, and time, just like those marbles, follows the curves. If you stand near a black hole, a place where gravity is unimaginably strong, something even stranger happens. To an outside observer, you appear to freeze. Your time slows to a crawl. You never quite cross the edge. You hover, suspended like a paused frame in a film. But to you, on the inside, time feels normal. You continue forward, unaware of the outside world watching you slow to stillness. It's eerie, it's beautiful, and it's real. Even everyday technology depends on this strange behaviour. Take GPS, for example. The satellites orbiting above Earth experience both motion and weaker gravity. Both affect their internal clocks. If we didn't account for these shifts, your GPS would quickly become useless, misplacing you by miles within hours. But thanks to relativity, those shifts are calculated and corrected silently, constantly. Every time you check your location, the math of Einstein is running behind the scenes. It's strange to think that something so abstract, so theoretical, can have such concrete consequences. That an idea scribbled in a notebook over a century ago now guides your Uber driver to your doorstep. But this is the power of a flexible universe, one where time, once thought to be a rigid backdrop, turns out to be as bendable as cloth. And if time is bendable, then what does it mean to say that time flows? If it flows at different rates depending on where you are or how you move, is it even flowing at all? Einstein once wrote, in a letter to the family of a deceased friend, "The distinction between past, present and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion." He wasn't being poetic, he was being precise. If time does not pass the same way for everyone, if it stretches, bends, warps, pauses, then maybe it's not passing at all. Maybe the idea of time moving is just something our minds create to explain how we experience it. A story we tell ourselves so that life feels like a journey. But perhaps we're not moving through time. Perhaps we're stationary, fixed in our place in the four-dimensional sculpture of space-time. Perhaps every moment already exists, waiting quietly in its corner of the universe. Perhaps you're not travelling forward, you're simply unfolding, layer by layer, page by page, not because the book is being written, but because you're reading it. And as we prepare to leave the world of relativity behind and enter stranger territories still, entropy, memory, the arrow of time, we carry with us this quiet, lingering truth. Time is not constant. It is curved, local, woven with gravity and speed, and maybe, just maybe, it's not moving at all. Let's step into your kitchen for a moment. It's early morning, quiet. You've just made a fresh cup of tea. Stem curls upward, tracing invisible shapes in the air. You set the cup down, get distracted for a few minutes. Maybe you check your phone, glance out the window, pet the cat. When you return, your tea is no longer hot. The steam is gone. The warmth has drifted into the room. Now, here's the question. Have you ever seen that process happen in reverse? Have you ever watched a cold cup of tea spontaneously grow warmer, pulling heat back from the room? Have you seen fallen leaves gather themselves up and return to the branch? Have you ever witnessed a shattered glass reassembling on the floor? Of course not. And not because it's impossible in the laws of physics. Most of those laws, strangely enough, don't care about direction. They don't say whether time must move forward or backward. In fact, the equations work the same either way. But in the world we live in, the world of breakfast and breakage, of warmth fading and things falling apart, there is one deep, persistent truth. Things tend to go from order to disorder. This is entropy. And entropy might be the closest thing we have to a clock built into the universe. The second law of thermodynamics tells us that in any closed system, entropy, the measure of disorder, will either increase or stay the same. It never decreases. That's why your tea cools down. That's why your desk gets messy. That's why broken things don't spontaneously reassemble. Not because they can't, but because they're vastly more likely to stay broken than to fall back into place. There are more ways for something to be disordered than ordered. A shattered plate has 1,000 possible arrangements. A perfectly intact plate. Just one. And the universe, by its nature, drifts toward those higher probability states, toward more mess, more randomness, more entropy. And as entropy increases, we feel time move forward. You wake up, and the bed is messy. You slice an apple, and it browns. You light a candle, and the wax melts. These are not just changes, they are changes in one direction. And because of them, you can tell that today is not yesterday, that something has changed in a way that feels irreversible. This arrow, the arrow of time, is not like the ticking of a clock. It is not mechanical. It is statistical, a story told by probability. But it's a very convincing story. Imagine you're watching a film of a glass falling from a table and shattering on the floor. You could play that film forward or backward, and one version would feel right, while the other would feel deeply wrong. You know intuitively which way time flows in that scene, not because of physics, but because of entropy. It's the same with smoke rising from a candle, a puddle drying on the sidewalk, ice melting in a glass. You never expect the smoke to gather and return. The puddle doesn't reform into a neat raindrop. The ice doesn't leap back into its original cube. Entropy whispers the direction. It gives time its slope, its gradient, its sense of before and after. But here's where things become stranger, softer, more uncertain. Because this arrow, so strong, so intuitive, is not written into the universe's most fundamental laws. It's not in gravity. It's not in electromagnetism. It's not in the equations that govern particles and forces. Those laws don't prefer a direction. They work just as well if time runs backward. So why then does our universe seem to move only forward? One answer, nestled in the folds of cosmology, is that the universe began in a very low entropy state. At the moment of the Big Bang, the cosmos was incredibly ordered, dense, uniform, and as it expanded, entropy began to rise. Structures formed, stars ignited, planets spun into place, and with each passing eon the universe grew more complex, more chaotic, more spread out, and so we drift. Not because time is pulling us, but because entropy is rising. You might think of it like standing on a hill of marbles. The top is neat, balanced, improbable. The bottom is a mess of marble scattered in every direction. Once you start sliding down, you can't help but go further into chaos. That's not because gravity is forcing you. It's because disorder is so much more likely. Entropy does not care what time is. It only cares that things don't reassemble themselves without effort. It's why a hot cup of tea cools, and why time appears to move. But this brings up a soft, unsettling possibility. If the arrow of time is tied to entropy, and if entropy is just a matter of probability, then perhaps time doesn't really flow at all. Perhaps what we call flow is just our experience of shifting from lower entropy to higher entropy states, a kind of narrative stitched together by increasing disorder. Maybe time is not a current dragging us forward, but a landscape we walk through, one step after another, each footfall leaving a deeper impression than the last. And if that's true, then what we think of as the past is simply the part of the landscape we've already walked through, the low entropy terrain behind us, and the future is the part we haven't reached yet, higher entropy, more scattered, more uncertain, but both still exist, both are still there. In the end, entropy does more than just cool your tea or scatter your socks across the floor. It gives us the illusion of movement. It paints a direction onto the otherwise directionless canvas of space-time. And if time is the canvas, then entropy might be the brush that draws our journey forward. So as we sweep the crumbs from the table, fold the laundry, or turn off the lamp at the end of the day, remember, you are watching entropy at work. You are living along the arrow. But maybe, just maybe, the arrow is something we see, not something that's really there. You remember your childhood, or at least pieces of it. The smell of a certain breakfast, the way your hands felt pressing against wet sand, the sound of a voice that's no longer there. You remember yesterday, what you had for lunch maybe, or a conversation you wish had gone differently. You remember earlier today, a stray thought, a moment of laughter, a door left, open. But you don't remember tomorrow. You never do. No one wakes up knowing what they will say at 3:37 p.m, or who will cross their path at the supermarket, or whether the rain will begin just as they leave the house without an umbrella. You remember the past, never the future. And that feels obvious, expected. So expected, in fact, that we rarely question it. But tonight, let's question it. Because if the universe doesn't prefer a direction, if, as we've seen, the laws of physics are mostly time-symmetric, then why do we feel time going in one way only? Why do we walk forward with our memories trailing behind instead of the other way around? The answer may have more to do with us than with time itself. Your brain is a magnificent, flawed, deeply limited storyteller. It doesn't perceive reality directly. It reconstructs it, interprets it, makes guesses. When you hear something, there's a delay, tiny, invisible, but real. When you touch something, the signal travels through nerves, up your spine, into your brain, where it's interpreted and placed into the theatre of now. But now isn't an instant. It's a small window, a stitched-together illusion that feels smooth, but is, at its core, assembled from parts. In a way, you're always living just a fraction behind the present. Your experience of the world isn't live. It's buffered, like a delayed broadcast from a slightly distant planet. And memory is part of that broadcast system, a way to keep track, to assemble a continuous thread of identity. But it's not neutral. It has preferences. Your brain is built to record the past and not the future because of how entropy works. In a low entropy system, things are more predictable, more organized, easier to store, easier to recall. The past, by definition, has already happened. It is fixed. It is, in some way, written. The future is uncertain. It is high entropy, unpredictable, unmeasured. And so your brain, favouring order, stores the states it can depend on. It's not that the future isn't real. It's that your brain isn't built to remember it. This ties into something deeper, something called causality. Causality is the principle that causes come before effects. If you drop a glass, it shatters. If you light a match, it burns. But not the other way around. The cause leads, the effect follows. We build our whole understanding of time around this principle. But even causality is not absolute. At the level of quantum physics, things get fuzzy. Sometimes it's unclear which came first. Sometimes entangled particles affect each other instantly across space. The arrow wobbles, direction becomes negotiable. So why does it feel so solid to us? One answer comes from something called a light cone. Imagine dropping a pebble into a pond. The ripples expand outward. In space-time, any event, like a pebble drop, has a similar shape. There's a region of space and time that can be affected by that event, and a region that cannot. The area that can be affected is called the future light cone, the set of all places and moments that could possibly feel the influence of that pebble. The area that could have influenced the pebble before it fell, that's the past light cone. Everything else, too far away, too fast-moving, is outside the cone. It neither affects nor is affected. You, right now, are at the tip of your own light cone. You can remember everything inside your past cone. But the future? It hasn't rippled into you yet. And so, you walk forward. Not because time flows, but because influence flows. You're a collection of causes and effects, and each new memory you make, each new moment you assemble, feels like a step in a direction. But direction is an illusion born from accumulation. Think of a Polaroid camera. It takes a photo, and slowly the image appears. The moment already happened, but your experience of it develops in stages. Memory is like that. It gives the illusion of forward motion, because each image is added to the stack. But what if every photo was already taken? What if the full album, your whole life, already exists, and you're simply leafing through it, one snapshot at a time? This idea unsettles the mind, because we're used to being the author of our story. But what if we're the reader, or the character? Perhaps you're not moving through time. Perhaps you are being revealed. The future feels invisible not because it's empty, but because you haven't opened that page yet. And this too could be tied to entropy. The future is higher in entropy, not because it's further away, but because it is more disordered. The signal hasn't come in clearly yet. It's still being sorted, and so your brain, that careful curator of clarity, writes down only what's clean, only what has happened, only what fits the thread. It remembers the tidy, not the tangled. It's not that the future is blank, it's just too noisy. So we remember the past because it's easier, because it's cooler, quieter, simpler, not because it's more real. And if that's true, if memory is just an arrow drawn by order, then maybe the future is just as real as the past. It's simply not filed yet. If you close your eyes for a moment and imagine your life stretched out behind you like a long, winding road, you might picture yourself standing somewhere in the middle of it, able to look back, perhaps dimly, at what's come before, but unable to see much of what lies ahead. You might imagine time as a line, with the past behind you and the future just out of sight, always advancing, always pulling you forward. But what if that's not how it really is? What if time isn't a line you're walking down, but a place you're already part of? This is where we begin to drift into deeper waters, into ideas that are not only strange, but deeply quieting in their strangeness. Because now we arrive at the idea of the block, universe, a view of reality in which time doesn't flow at all. Instead, everything that has ever happened, or ever will happen, just is. Past, present, future, they all exist, fully formed side by side like pages in a book. You, at this moment, reading these words. You, 5 minutes ago, wondering whether to stay up late. You, 3 decades from now, older and perhaps a little wiser, watching light fall through a different window. All of these versions of you exist simultaneously in the block. The universe, in this view, is not unfolding. It's laid out, like a sculpture, 4-dimensional, complete. This idea doesn't come from science fiction, though it's often used there. It comes from physics, from Einstein's relativity, from the realization that simultaneity is relative, that now is not the same for everyone, that time is just another coordinate like space. And if you can't define a universal now, then maybe now isn't a privileged slice. Maybe all moments are equally real. This doesn't mean that you're frozen or stuck. It just means that what you think of as motion, this steady progression from second to second, is an illusion created by consciousness. Julian Barber, a British physicist and philosopher of time, describes something similar in his theory of Platonia. In Platonia, there is no time at all, only a vast configuration space filled with nows, complete moments, frozen like photographs. Each now contains a full arrangement of the universe, where everything is, how everything feels, who you are, but there's no need for these nows to be connected by a flowing thread. You don't move from one to the next. They simply all exist. So how do we explain the feeling of movement? Barber suggests that certain nows contain within them records of other nows. In other words, memory. In one moment, your mind contains the memory of a previous one. That's what gives you the sense of a past. But that memory is part of the current moment, not evidence of time's flow, but a feature of the stillness. It's like flipping through a flipbook. Each page shows a still image, but when you flip the pages quickly, the character seems to move. Your brain connects the dots, but the motion is not real, it's constructed. The figure on page 20 doesn't know about page 21. The illusion is yours. Or think of a flashlight sweeping across a painting in the dark. The painting is complete. Every colour, every shape already there, but you only see a small piece at a time, and as the beam glides across, it feels like something is changing, but nothing is. The light is simply revealing what's already there. That's us. We are the beam, and the universe is the painting. In the block universe, every moment of your life is still real, still existent. That awkward conversation you keep replaying, still there. tucked quietly in its place, the birth you don't remember, the embrace you'll feel years from now, the very moment you decided to stay and listen to this story, all of them preserved. Not like memories, but like rooms in a house. You may be standing in the kitchen now, but the bedroom still exists. You're just not in it. It's hard to accept this view because we are so deeply tied to the feeling of time moving, of progress, of now being the only real thing. But that may be a trick of consciousness. A useful trick, certainly. A survival tool that lets us make plans, tell stories, mourn and celebrate. But not necessarily the truth. If time doesn't flow, then nothing is ever truly lost. That moment you cherish hasn't vanished. It still exists, somewhere in the block. Still real. Still whole. It's not past. It's simply elsewhere. And if time doesn't flow, then perhaps your future is not something you rush toward, breathless, unsure. Perhaps it's already there, waiting like a closed letter, waiting for your eyes to find it, waiting to be read. This idea doesn't mean you lack freedom. It doesn't mean you're trapped in destiny's net. It simply means that the net itself, the whole of it, is already woven, and your place in it, however small, is not fleeting. It is eternal. So maybe you're not a traveller moving through time. Maybe you're a structure within it, a shimmer in the block, a soft part of the sculpture, a single, complete moment in a vast, quiet whole. Long before the ticking of clocks, before the hum of machines and the glow of digital numbers on a screen, time lived in the sky. You could see it in the curve of the moon, in the rising and setting of the sun, in the slow, patient tilt of the earth as it traced its path through seasons. You didn't need a wristwatch to know that winter was coming. You only needed to see the birds fly low, the light shift to gold, the leaves begin to lose their grip. This was how time first arrived. In cycles, gentle, repeating, woven into the world. Our ancestors didn't think of time as something to control. It was something to observe, to wait for. It moved like a tide, slow but certain. Days were marked by sunrise and sunset, months by the waxing and waning of the moon, years by the return of certain stars to their places in the sky. Time was not an abstraction, it was a visible rhythm. For early humans, survival depended on this rhythm. You needed to know when the rains would come, when the animals would migrate, when to plant, when to harvest, when to move on. Timekeeping wasn't a luxury. It was a quiet partnership with nature. And so they began to mark it. Some of the earliest calendars were not books or scrolls, but stones, arranged in circles, aligned with solstices, etched with notches. You can still see them today in places like Stonehenge or Nabta Playa. Vast, silent reminders that long ago someone stood exactly where you might now stand and looked to the sky, trying to understand the rhythm of time. As villages became towns and rituals became ceremonies, timekeeping grew more intentional. Sundials appeared, simple tools that used the shadow of a stick to tell the hour. The sun would move, the shadow would shift, and time would reveal itself in the angle of light. Of course, this only worked on clear days, so we learned to measure time with water. The clepsydra, or water clock, flowed with remarkable patience. A bowl filled with water, dripping into another, its slow rhythm echoing the passing moments. The amount of water that passed told you how much time had slipped by. No sun required, only gravity and a vessel. Later came hourglasses, sand flowing from one chamber to another, still dependent on nature, but portable, reliable, and strangely calming. Even today, watching sand fall remains hypnotic. It reminds you that time isn't sudden. It's soft, grain by grain. These devices weren't just inventions. They were companions. Quiet tools for marking prayers, measuring speeches, timing medicines or kitchen fires. They were timekeepers not only of minutes, but of meaning. And through all this, time was still seen as cyclical. It moved in loops. The sun would rise again, the seasons would return. Birth and death were not linear events, but parts of a spiral. Many cultures, ancient Egyptian, Mayan, Hindu, held time as sacred and circular, not something to be outrun or conquered, but danced with, respected. It wasn't until much later that we began to slice time into tighter pieces. As civilizations grew more complex, cities, trade routes, armies, so did the need to agree on what time was. You couldn't organize a harvest festival or a military campaign if everyone was operating on a different version of noon. Time needed to become more consistent. But still, for thousands of years, time remained tethered to the natural world. Even medieval towns kept time by the bell tower, ringing out the hours according to the sun's position. Farmers followed the light, not the minute hand. And then, quietly, the gears began to turn. In the late 14th century, the first mechanical clocks began to appear in European monasteries. Massive, intricate machines made of iron and wood, designed not for personal use, but for the rhythm of community prayer. These clocks didn't have faces, they rang bells. Sound was the signal. Time was felt, not seen. It was only much later in the 17th century that time would begin to march with precision, when a Dutch scientist named Christian Huygens invented the pendulum clock. By using the steady swing of a weighted arm, his design kept time to within seconds per day. For the first time in history, humans could measure the flow of time with extraordinary accuracy. The second became more than just a word. It became a slice of experience. This was the beginning of a shift from observing time to measuring it, from flowing with nature to regulating ourselves by machines. But that's a story we'll follow in the next session. For now, rest in this thought. For most of human history, time was not numbers and pressure and alarms. It was the moon rising over a quiet hill. It was the sound of water echoing in a clay bowl. It was light and darkness, sowing and harvest, the hush between footsteps. Time was something you lived with, not something you obeyed. Imagine walking through a medieval village just before dawn. The streets are quiet. The air is thick with fog. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls. Not because it is exactly 6 o'clock, but because the monk in the bell tower saw the horizon begin to pale. That single sound, soft and metallic, echoes through the cobbled alleys, waking bakers, summoning prayers, opening the first shutters of the day. This was time, felt more than measured, tied to light, to sleep, to chores and seasons. But that world was beginning to change. By the 17th century, the invention of the pendulum clock by Christian Huygens changed the game entirely. Where earlier clocks might drift minutes over a day, Huygens' pendulum design could keep time to within seconds. Suddenly, time was no longer a broad rhythm. It was a precise tick, reliable, predictable, uniform. And with that tick came a different kind of pressure. As pendulum clocks spread, time became increasingly standardized. Minutes and seconds no longer existed only in laboratories or monasteries. They entered homes, offices, ships, and factories. To live in a city was to be surrounded by timekeepers, bells, clock towers, later pocket watches and wall clocks, each one reminding you that a new slice of time had arrived. In the 18th and 19th centuries, as the Industrial Revolution reshaped societies, time took on a new role, not just as a background rhythm but as a regulator. Machines needed to be operated at specific hours. Workers needed to show up and leave on schedule. Coal had to be shoveled, looms had to spin, trains had to depart precisely, and shipments had to be synchronized across towns, cities, even countries. And so, for the first time in human history, time was not just local, it had to be shared. This led to the birth of time zones. Before standardized time, each town set its clocks by the sun, meaning that noon in one village might be several minutes off from noon in the next. This didn't matter much when people walked or rode horses. But with the arrival of trains, fast, regular, linking distant places, it became chaotic. Train schedules overlapped, mismatched, collided. People missed departures. Stations didn't know when to expect arrivals. In 1884, the world's powers gathered at the International Meridian Conference and agreed to divide the globe into 24 time zones, centered around a prime meridian in Greenwich, England. It was a moment of global agreement, but also, quietly, a moment of surrender. Humanity had agreed not just to mark time, but to obey it in unison. From then on, the world began to move in sync. Factory whistles signalled lunch breaks. School bells ended recess. Wristwatches buzzed. Punch cards recorded your hours. Cities became symphonies of scheduled movement. You woke up not with the sun, but with the alarm. You ate not when hungry, but when the clock allowed. Trains didn't wait. Jobs didn't pause. The world ran on mechanical time, and slowly something changed inside us too. Where time had once been shaped by nature, it was now shaped by machines, by gears and springs, later by electricity, then by quartz, and eventually by atomic vibrations so precise they lose less than a second over millions of years. But along the way, that precision brought with it a subtle shift in how we feel time. We began to experience time not as something soft or spacious or sacred, but as something scarce. There's never enough of it. We run out of time. We're late. We feel behind. We try to manage it, as if it were a budget. We talk about making time, wasting time, saving time. Time became a currency, and we became its anxious accountants. But mechanical time doesn't just control schedules, it reshapes minds. Studies show that when people are constantly exposed to clock time, especially in fast-paced environments, they begin to perceive time differently. It feels tighter, faster, less forgiving. Waiting for 5 minutes in a line can feel unbearable, because our brains have been trained to divide the day into units. 5 minutes becomes 1/12 of an hour, which becomes one tick off the day's checklist. Time is no longer lived, it is counted. And what's more, this mechanical perception of time changes how we remember. In agrarian societies where time followed the sun and the soil, people recalled events based on natural cycles. It happened before the harvest, or just after the first frost. But in modern urban life, memory becomes tied to timestamps. We remember based on dates, clocks, appointments, notifications. In some ways, this allows for more clarity. In other ways, it flattens experience into a timeline, a record, a scroll. But deep inside us, there is still a memory of older rhythms. Even now, on vacation or in nature, or during a power outage, you may feel yourself slip out of clock time. You wake when the light changes. You eat when you're hungry. You lose track of hours, and suddenly, strangely, you feel better, less rushed, less measured, because time hasn't changed. You have simply returned to a more ancient mode of living it. Mechanical time, with all its benefits, has made life more efficient, but not always more gentle. It gave us trains, global coordination, and medical precision. But it also gave us deadlines, anxiety, and a constant sense of not quite being where we should be. And so, as you listen now, as the gears slow down and the day fades, consider this. The clock on your wall is not the only timekeeper in your life. There's another, on, quieter, older, softer. It's in the way your breathing slows when the sky turns orange. It's in the hush that comes over a room at dusk. It's in the rhythm of your footsteps, the stretch of your arms, the steady flicker of thought. That too is time, and sometimes it's the one worth listening to. You might think you're living in the present, that this very moment, this word, this breath, this heartbeat, is arriving exactly when it happens. But that too is a story your brain is telling you. A well-constructed story made to feel seamless, like a stream, like a film without a cut. But beneath that feeling lies something quieter, something stranger. Because you are always a little bit behind, not by minutes, not even by full seconds, but by just enough, a thin delay, only milliseconds long, for your brain to gather what it needs, piece it together, and gently present it to you as now. Let's say you touch something hot, a cup of tea that's been sitting just a little too long on the warmer. Your fingers feel the heat. You pull your hand back. It feels immediate, but it isn't. The nerve signal takes time to travel. Your brain registers it, interprets it, and places that signal into the ongoing narrative of your experience. And when it does, it has to reconcile that signal with everything else arriving. What you see, what you hear, what you were just thinking about, touch, sight, sound. They don't all arrive in your mind at once. The light from the teacup travels at the speed of, light. The sound of the mug shifting on the table travels more slowly. The feeling in your fingertips takes even longer to register. And yet, you don't experience these events in layers. You don't feel the world in pieces. You feel it as one complete moment. That's because your brain waits. It holds on to each input for a tiny bit of time, just long enough to combine them like ingredients in a recipe. It creates a composite, a version of reality in which everything appears to happen at once. A symphony, not a solo. This process is called temporal binding, and it's one of the quiet miracles of consciousness. You don't experience raw input, you experience edited experience. This is why, when something surprises you, like a loud bang or a flash of lightning, you might feel as though time briefly jolts. Your brain is recalibrating the mix, reconstructing the sequence, trying to make sense of signals that didn't arrive in the usual pattern. And all of this means that your sense of now is never now. It's always just a beat behind, a delayed broadcast, a post-processed moment. This is not a flaw, it's a feature. Your brain isn't trying to show you the world in real time. It's trying to show you a coherent world, a world that makes sense. That's why you don't notice the delay, because noticing it would break the illusion, and the illusion of being exactly here in an indivisible present is what allows you to feel whole. But there's more. Even when inputs aren't synchronized, say when you see something happen before you hear it, your brain quietly compensates. It knows that sight moves faster than sound, that the crack of thunder arrives after the flash of lightning, that voices on a distant hill arrive a breath too late, and so it adjusts, it syncs, it smooths. That's why you don't walk around constantly noticing delays. The delay is baked in. Time is edited before you're even aware of it. And this gives rise to something even more subtle, the illusion of continuity. You feel like time flows, like there's a steady stream of consciousness linking you from one moment to the next. But in reality, your brain is building that stream frame by frame, like a film reel, like a flip book. Your consciousness is made of snapshots, stitched together so quickly, so seamlessly, that it feels like motion. This idea can be unsettling, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't mean that your experience is fake. It means that your experience is crafted, with care, with efficiency, with artistry. Your brain is not a camera, it's a storyteller, and time is part of the story. It picks which details to include, which to leave out. It compresses some things, stretches others. Sometimes in moments of trauma or beauty, it slows everything down. Other times, it speeds things up. But the central rhythm, the ordinary ongoing beat of life, is composed quietly, with no need for your permission. This also explains why time can feel so different depending on what you're doing. When you're bored, the brain's frame rate slows. Each moment feels longer, stretched, drawn out. When you're engaged, it speeds up, compressing, skipping over repetitive input, giving you a sense of flow. And all of that, the dilation, the compression, is happening on top of a perception that was already delayed. So not only are you not in the present you experience can vary in shape, size, and depth. And yet, it all feels perfectly natural. Because what your brain does best is not show you the truth. It shows you coherence. It gives you something you can walk around inside, something you can rely on, something you can build a life upon. And that's remarkable. You are living inside a pocket of time, handcrafted for you by your brain, a moment that is not immediate but cohesive, not precise but meaningful. And once you begin to understand that, even gently, it becomes easier to see how time may not be what it seems if the mind can shape it, reorder it, slow it, fabricate it. Then perhaps the sense of time flowing is not a reflection of the universe, but a reflection of you. Maybe the stream of time doesn't run through your life. Maybe your life is what gives the stream its shape. Think about the last time you waited for something important. Maybe you were sitting in a waiting room, the kind with muted magazines, a humming light overhead, and the faint smell of antiseptic in the air. Perhaps you were waiting for news, or a name to be called, or just for the door to open. Time in that moment likely didn't feel like it was moving. It felt like it had sunk to the bottom of a pool. Seconds stretched, minutes crawled. You checked the clock, sure that at least 10 had passed, only to find it had been 2. Now think of another kind of moment. A dinner with an old friend you hadn't seen in years. A quiet walk at sunset. A weekend that passed so quickly, you found yourself blinking and it was already over. Those moments didn't stretch. They collapsed. Time folded into itself. The hours, though real, felt like they slipped away before you could even notice. Both moments were real. Both had the same number of minutes. But they didn't feel the same. This is one of the mind's oldest tricks. Time is not measured evenly across emotion. It is shaped by it. When we're frightened, for instance, the brain floods with adrenaline. Our senses sharpen. We become more alert, more aware, more attuned to every detail. It's an evolutionary advantage. More attention means a better chance of survival. But it also means that the brain is taking in more information per second. When the moment passes and the mind reflects back on it, the memory is thick, full, dense with impressions. And because it contains more, it feels like it lasted longer. That's why moments of fear seem to stretch. Because your brain recorded more frames per second. It's like watching a film in slow motion. Not because time slowed, but because your awareness sped up. On the other hand, when we're at peace, or joyful, or deeply engaged in something we love, the opposite can happen. The brain skips the repetitive parts. It doesn't store every detail. It lets the moment pass through gently, like wind through open curtains. And so, in retrospect, these moments seem brief, even if they were long. It's not time that's different. It's what we felt during it. This is why children often feel like time moves more slowly. For them, everything is new. Their brains are recording at full resolution. Each tree, each word, each sound is noticed, catalogued, examined. The days are full because the world is new. One summer afternoon can stretch endlessly, but for adults, much of life becomes familiar. The brain economizes, it filters. We begin to chunk experience into routines. Time seems to speed up, not because it does, but because fewer memories are formed. The day disappears because the brain has nothing new to hold on to. It's also why older adults sometimes feel that years go by faster than they used to. Time compresses not because the years are shorter, but because fewer novel experiences fill the memory. The clock ticks the same, the mind collects less, and then there's attention. When you're fully focused, immersed in a conversation, or absorbed in, painting, or lost in a book, you don't think about time. Hours pass without you noticing. Psychologists call this state flow. It's when the mind becomes aligned with the task and time becomes secondary. You don't lose time, you stop measuring it. But when your attention is split, checking your phone, refreshing a screen, glancing at the door, time becomes fractured. You notice it more. You count it. You wonder where it's gone, even as you continue slicing it into smaller and smaller pieces. And then there's love. Falling in love has a peculiar relationship with time. In the beginning, every glance, every word, every brush of the hand feels charged, suspended. A second holds a novel's worth of feeling. But as love deepens, it changes. Time no longer expands in surprise. It begins to soften into comfort. You stop noticing time altogether. A walk becomes timeless. A shared silence becomes its own kind of hour. Love, at its best, doesn't stretch time or compress it. It makes time gentle. We also feel time differently when we're alone. Solitude can either stretch or collapse time depending on how we enter it. Boredom expands the minutes, loneliness stretches the hours, but peaceful solitude, a moment of stillness, watching rain from a window, or sitting with a warm drink, can make time feel spacious. Not long, not short, just open. These emotional distortions aren't errors. They're part of how the brain assigns meaning. You remember more when something matters. You recall less when it doesn't. Time, as it's felt, becomes not just a measure, but a mirror, reflecting the shape of our feelings, our priorities, our presence. In that way, time is never just the ticking of a clock. It's a feeling. And like all feelings, it changes, moment to moment, hour to hour, year to year. That's why two people in the same place can feel time so differently. One may be anxious, counting every second. The other may be daydreaming, unaware that time is moving at all. Time isn't in the room, it's in the mind. And so, as you sit with these words, you may notice your own sense of time shifting, slowing, stretching, softening. That is your attention pulling you inward. That is your breath joining the rhythm. That is emotion, memory, and meaning, all quietly reshaping the hours. Time may be universal in physics, but inside you, it has always been personal. Some nights you fall asleep in what feels like an instant. One moment you're shifting the pillow, adjusting the blanket, tracing stray thoughts across the ceiling, and the next, nothing. A soft and absolute silence wraps itself around your mind, and then, in what feels like a blink, you find yourself inside something else entirely. A conversation is already happening. You're in a place you half recognize. The sky's the wrong color. The ground bends in impossible ways. Someone is talking, but their words echo like memory. There are no clocks in, dreams, and yet time still seems to move. Not like waking time, not linearly, not cleanly. But it moves all the same. Dreams are strange creatures, fluid, elusive, stitched together from fragments. They often feel long, epic even. You might live through entire days, visit cities that never were, speak with people who've been gone for years, and yet when you finally wake and check the time, only 5 or 6 minutes have passed. This distortion isn't just poetic, it's physiological. During REM sleep, when most vivid dreaming occurs, the brain is as active as it is during waking life. Electrical signals bounce across regions. The visual cortex lights up. The emotional centers, like the amygdala, flare with intensity. But the part of the brain responsible for logical sequencing, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, quiets down. This combination creates a space where time no longer has to behave. Events don't need causes. Consequences arrive before actions. A dream can begin in a forest and end on a train, and in the moment it all makes perfect sense. But even in dreams, the mind seeks sequence. It's as if the brain can't help but lay down a thread, even when the cloth has no edges. Stories emerge, motifs recur, emotions drive narratives forward. You still remember before and after, even if they are absurdly stitched. So how does the brain measure time when the body is still, the senses are offline, and there are no external cues? It doesn't measure it the way a clock does. It builds it. It creates a sense of time from the intensity of experience, the richness of the imagined world, the emotional weight of each moment. In a sense, dream time is not stretched across seconds, but across meaning, and meaning isn't linear. Consider this. In waking life, we often define time by change. A ball rolls across a table, a page turns, a leaf falls. But in dreams, you can have change without motion. You simply know something has shifted. A new scene, a new rule, a sudden realization. It doesn't have to unfold. It just arrives. And this may offer us a glimpse into something deeper, something that echoes the earlier idea of Platonia, Julian Barber's timeless universe of nows. In Platonia, each moment exists as a fully formed configuration of the universe. There's no real movement, only the illusion of it, created by the memory embedded in each still frame. Dreams, in a way, feel like this. Each dream moment is complete. It contains its own rules, its own logic, its own story. And yet, strung together, they feel like a sequence. You wake up with the impression that something happened, that time passed. But maybe what passed wasn't time. Maybe it was attention. Maybe it was emotion. Maybe it was your mind flipping through its own internal block universe, one imagined configuration at a time. There have even been studies where researchers asked lucid dreamers, people who are aware they're dreaming, to perform tasks while inside their dreams. In some cases, the dreamers were asked to count to 10, or perform a movement, and then signal when they were done. Astonishingly, their estimates of how long the task took inside the dream roughly matched real-world time. The body, sleeping still in the lab, moved its eyes left, right in a prearranged code, a signal from the dream world to the waking one. So even within a world where logic dissolves and gravity takes holidays, the mind can maintain a sense of duration. This suggests that the experience of time is not bound to clocks or sunrises or mechanical rhythms. It's a capacity of the brain, a structure it carries with it, even into dreams, and that means time, at least as we experience it, is deeply mental. A dream with no clock still has urgency. A scene with no physics still feels like it's moving forward. Even a nightmare, terrifying though it may be, unfolds second by second, though those seconds are entirely invented. And when we wake, that illusion lingers. You open your eyes, you stare at the ceiling, you try to piece together what happened as if it had been real, because in the moment, it was. The time was felt, lived, recorded, even if it didn't follow the rules. So if dreams can hold time without obeying it, what does that say about waking time? What if our entire experience of time is dreamlike? What if the flow we feel, the past, the present, the unfolding future, is just the waking brain's more consistent version of that same illusion? A more reliable story, a more structured dream. In dreams we are free from the tyranny of seconds, free from deadlines and alarms, but not free from time entirely. We bring it with us. We create it as we go. And maybe, in that way, dreams remind us that time is not something we're in. It's something we participate in, something we help shape, something that arises with awareness and slips away when we stop observing. So tonight, as you fall into sleep and your thoughts begin to untether, remember this. You're not leaving time behind. You're simply entering a different kind. Picture yourself drifting through space, weightless, unhurried, watching stars shimmer like frozen raindrops against a black velvet sky. Somewhere ahead, there's a dark region. It doesn't shine. It doesn't reflect. It doesn't move the way other things do. At first glance, it almost looks like nothing at all. but you're falling toward it, slowly, inevitably. And with each breath, time begins to behave differently. This is the threshold of a black hole, the edge of the known and the edge of time itself. From the outside, someone watching your fall would see something strange. As you approach the event horizon, that invisible boundary beyond which nothing can return, your motion would appear to slow. Not just your movement, but your clock, your gestures, even the light bouncing off your skin. To them, you would appear to hang there, frozen at the edge, your descent taking longer and longer, approaching eternity. But you wouldn't feel frozen. To you, time would flow just as it always has. You would still blink, still breathe, still feel each second pass. Nothing about your internal clock would seem unusual, but something fundamental has changed. Time has become relative in a way that is no longer metaphorical. It is bent, twisted, uneven. The now you are in is no longer the same now that your observer sees. This is gravitational time dilation, taken to its extreme. Einstein's general theory of relativity predicted it, and we've since confirmed it in many ways. Clocks on airplanes tick slightly slower than those on the ground. Satellites in orbit must adjust for both speed and gravitational difference to stay in sync. But here, near a black hole, that effect is magnified to a staggering degree. It's as though time itself is stretched thin, pulled like taffy by the enormous gravity well. The closer you get to the centre, the more the stretching increases, until the idea of a shared moment breaks down entirely. And what happens if you keep falling? You cross the event horizon. There's no jolt, no signpost, no cosmic toll booth. It feels like any other moment. But from this point forward, there is no turning back. Even light cannot escape. No message, no signal, no farewell. The laws of space and time have folded in such a way that all paths lead inward. Still, your clock ticks. You're still moving, still thinking, still experiencing. But every path, forward, sideways, even up, now points in one direction, toward the singularity at the centre. From your perspective, time continues. But you are falling not just through space, you're falling through time itself. And the closer you get, the more compressed everything becomes. Distances shorten. Possibilities vanish. In a final, incomprehensible moment, all directions converge. At the singularity, our understanding ends. This isn't just a place where matter collapses. It's where our current physics, relativity, quantum mechanics, even the very fabric of causality begins to unravel. We can't describe what happens there, not truly. The math breaks down, the rules dissolve. Time, as we understand it, may cease to have meaning. For the person falling, there is no after. Not because time stops, your clock continues, but because all of your future leads to the same place. The singularity is not just in space. It is in your future, your destiny, your end of time. But for the person watching from afar, you never quite disappear. You simply freeze, dim, and fade. Time moves on for them. Stars spin, galaxies drift. But the moment of your fall appears forever suspended at the edge. A ghost trapped in gravity's slow-motion ballet. This contradiction is not a failure of imagination. It is the price of relativity. The price of truth in a universe that does not offer a single universal clock. There is no one now. There are only perspectives. And in the presence of something as extreme as a black hole, those perspectives fracture. The idea of a shared reality, a moment both of you can agree upon, vanishes. Time, it turns out, is not a thread stretched evenly across the cosmos. It is a local thing, a personal thing, a fragile thing, and in the presence of enough gravity, it can warp beyond recognition, it can stall, it can end. Not in a metaphorical sense, but in a literal, physical, measurable one. You may have heard the phrase, time stops at the event horizon. That's true from the outside. But from the inside, time does not stop. It ends. And that is a different thing entirely. It means that time is not a river, always flowing forward, the same for everyone. It is a landscape, a terrain. Some places are flat and calm. Others, like black holes, are deep valleys where time plunges, folds, and finally collapses. And standing at the edge of one of those valleys, watching a traveller vanish into silence, we're left not just with awe, but with a quiet sense of humility. Because we have spent so long believing we know what time is, and here, in the shadow of a black hole, time itself quietly reminds us, you've only just begun to ask the right questions. It's difficult to picture a place where space doesn't exist, where direction has no meaning, where time isn't ticking, crawling, or passing, but simply absent. And yet, at the heart of a black hole, that's what we're asked to imagine. Not a void, not an emptiness, but something more disorienting, a point where our understanding ends. This point is called a singularity, and it's not just an exotic feature of theoretical physics. It's a whisper from the edge of reality, a quiet reminder that even our most trusted equations have their limits. The singularity is where the fabric of space-time becomes infinitely curved, where gravity crushes everything into a single point with no volume and infinite density, where the very scaffolding that holds the universe together, the coordinates of time and space, no longer make sense. General relativity, Einstein's towering theory of how matter and gravity shape the cosmos, has carried us far. It predicts the warping of space by mass. It explains the bending of starlight near planets, the precession of Mercury's orbit, the existence of gravitational waves. It even leads us here, to black holes and to singularities. But once we reach this extreme, something begins to fray. The math gives strange answers, curves become infinite, quantities explode, and in that explosion, another set of rules begins to stir. Rules whispered by quantum mechanics. Quantum physics, the science of the very small, tells us that the universe is not smooth but grainy, not predictable but probabilistic. It describes a world of particles that flicker in and out of existence, of uncertainty, an entanglement of discrete packets of energy and matter. And yet, these two great frameworks, relativity and quantum mechanics, do not get along. They are like two brilliant musicians playing in different keys. Each works beautifully in its own realm, but when forced to share the same stage, like at a singularity, they clash. This is why black holes represent not just a physical boundary, but a conceptual one. It's not simply that we can't see past the event horizon. It's that our best tools for understanding stop working at the centre. Time, which once stretched and sagged under the influence of mass, now dissolves into something undefined. The equations don't tell us what's next. They don't even agree that next is a meaningful word. And this is where physicists begin to speculate, to imagine, to stretch. Some theories suggest that time inside the singularity might stop, not slow, but truly cease to have meaning. Without space to change, without a frame to compare to, time may no longer have direction, speed, or presence. Others suggest that time and space swap roles inside the black hole, that what was once time becomes space-like, and what was space becomes time-like, bending causality into a new shape we can't yet comprehend. There are also ideas that the singularity might not be a point at all, but a doorway, a bridge, a portal to another region of the universe, or even another universe entirely. These speculations are wrapped in caution, for they go far beyond what we can test or prove, but they are attempts to imagine what comes after time ends. One of the most elegant of these ideas is the holographic principle. It emerged not from black holes themselves, but from attempts to resolve a paradox. When a black hole consumes matter, what happens to the information contained in that matter? Does it vanish forever? That would violate the laws of quantum mechanics, which insist that information can never be destroyed. To solve this, physicists like Gerard 't Hooft and Leonard Susskind proposed that all the information inside a black hole might actually be stored on its surface, the event horizon. Just as a hologram encodes a three-dimensional image in a two-dimensional surface, the universe might be doing something similar. And if this is true for black holes, it might also be true for the entire cosmos. That is, the three-dimensional world we live in might be a projection of information stored on a distant two-dimensional boundary. Reality in this view is not built from solid objects moving through time, but from encoded patterns, like a cosmic shadow play. This doesn't mean the universe isn't real. It means it might be more relational than we imagined. Instead of being made of things, it may be made of interactions, and instead of time flowing independently, it may arise from the changing relationships between things, like the rhythm of a dance that only exists while the dancers move. In such a picture, time is not a background. It is an emergent property, not a stage upon which the universe unfolds, but something that emerges from the unfolding itself. This idea is deeply unsettling, but also deeply beautiful, because it means that time, like music, is not found in the notes alone, but in the space between them. It is not a thread pulled taut from beginning to end, but a pattern we perceive as movement, as change, as life. And standing here, at the imagined edge of a singularity, we are left not with certainty, but with humility. We built great clocks, told great stories, made bold predictions, and still, at the edge of space-time, we must admit, we do not know. We are peering into a silence so dense it folds light, into a stillness so absolute it swallows rhythm, into a place where time, our most trusted companion, may not follow us. And yet we continue to wonder, because even in the face of unknowing, curiosity persists, a gentle, stubborn kind of hope, that someday we might understand not just where time flows, but where it ends. When most people imagine a crystal, they picture something solid, clear, beautifully geometric, a snowflake, a salt grain, a shimmering gemstone cut just so. Crystals are the language of order in space, repeating patterns, elegant structures where atoms line up like dancers in a choreography that never falters. But what if there were a crystal not of space but of time? This is the idea behind time crystals, one of the strangest, most mind-bending concepts to emerge in modern physics. Not just a curiosity, but a real, experimentally observed phenomenon. And what they suggest may quietly challenge how we think about time at its deepest levels. To understand time crystals, we need to first think about symmetry, not just as something visual, but as something foundational in physics. The laws of nature are filled with symmetries. Flip a mirror and the rules still apply. Shift an object in space and gravity still behaves. Shift in time and the laws remain the same. This is time translation symmetry, the idea that physical laws don't change from one moment to the next. Most systems obey this, but time crystals don't. In 2012, Nobel laureate Frank Wilczek proposed a bizarre possibility. What if there were systems whose lowest energy state, their most at-rest configuration, still moved? Not across space, but through time. What if, even when undisturbed, the system exhibited a repeating pattern in time? At first, this seemed impossible. Motion requires energy. A pendulum swings only because something pushed it. A clock ticks because it's wound. But what Wilczek proposed was a system that changes rhythmically, not because it's being pushed, but because its structure requires it. Like a pendulum that swings forever, without friction, without loss, without input. Physicists were skeptical. Some thought it was a mathematical artifact, a clever but ultimately unreal idea. But then, in 2016 and 2017, time crystals were created in the lab. Using quantum systems, like trapped ions and carefully pulsed lasers, researchers observed behaviors that matched the theory. Systems that didn't just sit still, but oscillated in time, even at their lowest energy. These systems displayed a new kind of symmetry breaking, one that didn't exist before in physics. It was as if the material had invented its own clock, a heartbeat without a heart. But what does this mean? And why should we care when most of us are just trying to remember where we left our actual clocks? Because time crystals suggest that time doesn't always have to flow. They invite the possibility of order in time that doesn't depend on movement. They hint at a universe where certain systems can repeat, not because they are being driven, but because they are built to. In a way, this echoes ancient intuitions that the universe is not a river, always pushing forward, but a pattern, a rhythm, a loop. It resonates with the cyclical time of early civilizations, where days returned, seasons repeated, stars came back to the same places in the sky. Time crystals are not proof that time is a circle, or that time travel is real, or that we've broken the laws of thermodynamics. But they are a reminder that time, as we've defined it, may be more flexible than we thought. Because most of our definitions of time are bound up in change. We measure time by what moves, what decays, what ages. A ticking clock, a cooling cup of tea, a growing tree. But time crystals show us that change can occur without flow, that a system can be in motion without progressing. It challenges the very arrow of time, the idea that time must always move from past to future, driven by increasing entropy. In time crystals, the entropy doesn't increase. The motion is locked in, stable, protected by the rules of quantum mechanics. And so we find ourselves at a new frontier, a place where time might be discrete, not continuous, but quantized, like steps on a staircase instead of a ramp, where time might have phases like matter does, solid, liquid, gas, and now, crystalline time. The implications are still unfolding. Some researchers wonder whether time crystals could be used in quantum computing. Their stability might offer a way to keep delicate quantum information from being lost. Others wonder whether similar patterns exist in nature, in the pulsations of atoms, or even the structures of consciousness. But more than that, time crystals whisper something subtler. They remind us that we don't yet know what time is. We've described how it feels, how it bends, how it may emerge from deeper laws or be etched on cosmic boundaries. But even now, as we build crystals of time in laboratories, we are still brushing against the surface of the mystery. And perhaps that's the lesson. That time is not a single thing to be defined, but a tapestry of behaviours, a collage of perceptions, a language written in multiple dialects: rhythm, motion, decay, thought, memory, symmetry. Time crystals are just one dialect, a new way the universe speaks, and as we listen, we might begin to understand that time has always had more to say than we ever thought possible. Imagine a photo album, not just of your life, but of every life. Every moment: birth, breath, kiss, fall, turning point, tucked neatly between pages that no one flips. You're in it, not just once, but in countless ways. Laughing at age 5, turning a key in a door you'd later forget, holding someone's hand on a morning you didn't know would matter. It's all there, still, quiet, real. Now take that album and imagine it not as a collection of photos, but as something you live inside. This is one way to picture what physicists call the block universe, a model of space-time where all moments, past and future, are equally real. Instead of thinking of time as a river we move through, imagine it as a vast, silent landscape, a frozen terrain with hills and valleys, ridges and plateaus. Each point is a moment. Each moment is fixed, permanent, eternal. You're not flowing through this terrain, you are part of it. You might ask, if every moment already exists, what does that mean for choice, for change, for free will? It's a gentle but deeply personal question. If the decision you will make tomorrow already exists in the block, did you ever really choose it? Was the moment yours? There are many ways to think about this, some rigid, others softer. One way is to say, yes, the moment exists, but it exists because you chose it. Your decision is part of the terrain. You're not a marble rolling helplessly down a track. You're the shape of the track itself. Your intentions, your hesitations, your triumphs and regrets, all of them are baked into the structure of space-time. You do not lose agency in this view. You simply recognize that your agency is already woven into the story. This might sound strange at first. But think of a novel. To the characters inside the story, the future is unknown. They make decisions, they face uncertainty, they believe they have options, and in a way they do. But to you, the reader holding the book, all the pages already exist. You can flip forward. You can see what happens. But inside the story, time still feels real. The block universe asks us to consider that we are the story, and the book, and the reader. It's not a suggestion that life is meaningless or that effort is pointless. It's an invitation to imagine time not as a race but as a shape, one you inhabit completely, not just at the point called now. In this shape, your birth is still there, your first cry, your first step, your quietest thought, the one you never said aloud but still remember. They are not gone. They are simply elsewhere in the block. Moments don't vanish. They don't slip through your fingers and disappear. They remain part of the full geometry of your life. There's something comforting about that, because it means you don't leave moments behind. You build them, like cairns on a trail, like lights in a tunnel, and even if you don't visit them again, they don't stop being real. This view also reimagines time as something you can't fall out of. You can't be behind, you can't be ahead. You're always within. Even regret begins to soften here, because in the block universe, the person you were when you made a decision still exists, and the you who learned from it exists too. Both are real, both are held. Neither has to cancel the other out. In fact, perhaps they depend on each other. The same applies to aging. In this terrain, your younger self still plays, your older self still dreams. You're not shedding selves as you go. You're accumulating them. A layered sculpture, a time-built cathedral of memory and motion. You're vast, even if you feel small. So what do you do with this idea? You can't walk the terrain. You can't jump to another point. But you can realize that the feeling of being here, in this moment, is no less real just because other moments exist. You're still experiencing, still feeling, still conscious. The now is still yours. But maybe the now is not alone. Maybe it is surrounded, on all sides, by other nows, not as ghosts or echoes or hallucinations, but as full, complete, living moments. Yours, mine, everyone's. If this is true, then the universe isn't unfolding. It's already here, whole, waiting only for consciousness to move like a light across the terrain, illuminating one peak at a time, not erasing the rest, just gently passing over it. In that light, maybe free will doesn't vanish. Maybe it becomes sacred. Maybe knowing that each choice becomes permanent doesn't make it meaningless. It makes it matter more. Maybe the terrain is more beautiful than the river. And maybe, just maybe, the story of time isn't about what you've left behind, but about what's always with you. If every moment already exists, if your life, in all its subtle turns and quiet corners, is already laid out in the fabric of space-time, then what do we make of meaning? If we're not really moving through time, but simply part of its structure, fixed like pearls on a thread, what does it mean to live, to choose, to care? The question sounds heavy, maybe even a little cold. But perhaps the answer isn't found by staring at the machinery of time. It's found in the light that filters through it, in the experience itself. You are here in this moment, reading these words, breathing, thinking. perhaps remembering something, perhaps imagining something else. That experience of being you right now is not erased by the idea that other moments also exist. It is made possible by it. Even in a block universe, experience still happens. The moment isn't less real because it coexists with others. It is not competing for importance. It is simply where you are, and in that there is still meaning. Because meaning doesn't require movement, it requires presence. There's a soft but profound idea that arises from this view. You are not moving through time. You're not being pulled along by a current. You're not behind or ahead. You're woven into time itself. Time isn't something outside of you. You are time, a pattern of existence, stretched across moments, a living thread in a vast, motionless tapestry. And within that tapestry, memory becomes something sacred. Because memory is the part of the pattern you can still feel. It's how your consciousness stitches the train into a story. You remember your childhood, your first home, the smell of someone's cooking, the sound of a particular voice. Those aren't just echoes, they're pieces of you, anchored in moments that still exist. And every time you remember, you're brushing your fingers across that part of the block. You're not retrieving something lost. You're simply illuminating something that's always been there. And if that's true, then maybe nothing is ever truly lost. Not the people we loved. Not the days we wish we could return to. Not the parts of ourselves we thought we'd left behind. They are not gone. They are simply elsewhere in the architecture. Still real. Still intact. Still glowing softly in their corner of eternity. There is comfort in that. Because so much of our fear around time comes from the sense that it steals from us, that it takes things, people, places, years, and scatters them beyond reach, that it rushes past us, pulling the ground out from beneath our feet. But if time is not a river, if it's a mountain or a block or a timeless whole, then those fears begin to loosen their grip. Maybe we haven't lost anything. Maybe we're just no longer standing on that particular part of the mountain. And maybe the part of us that longs to return, the ache of nostalgia, the pulse of memory, the ache in the chest when we hear an old song, maybe that's the part of us still echoing with the reality of those moments, not as illusions, but as coexisting truths. This way of thinking doesn't make grief disappear. It doesn't undo the fact that we live from moment to moment, experiencing change and absence and uncertainty. But it gives those experiences a kind of shape, a framework in which sorrow doesn't erase joy, in which goodbye doesn't erase hello, because both exist, because time doesn't destroy, it holds. And when you begin to see yourself not as a single point moving forward, but as a stretched and shimmering thing across space-time, something elegant, something vast, it becomes easier to forgive the moments that didn't go the way you hoped, to feel a little less urgency to correct, control, or chase, to simply be in the moment you are in. This doesn't mean you should stop caring. Quite the opposite. It means that what you choose still matters. Not because it changes the block, but because it's what fills it with meaning. Your joys, your regrets, your laughter and pain, all of them are part of the shape. They are the texture of time, and within that texture, meaning arises not from progress, but from participation. It's not about what you're racing toward. It's about how fully you are here. In this still, eternal structure, to love someone is to make that corner of the block glow a little brighter. To say something kind is to add warmth to a particular moment that will always exist. To be gentle with yourself, even just once, is to shape the structure of your life in a way that no entropy can erase. If time does not flow, then your presence, right now, is not a passing thing. It is permanent. And that means you are never just a memory in motion. You are a moment the universe made, and you remain. Each night, without fail, you surrender to sleep. It happens gradually, like the setting of the sun or the dimming of a room. Slow, quiet, almost unnoticeable at first. Your thoughts become loose, shapes blur, the world softens, and eventually you're not quite here anymore. You drift into a state that doesn't care what hour it is, what tasks were left unfinished, what time the alarm will ring. Sleep doesn't care about the clock. It happens outside of time, or at least outside of the way we usually measure it. And in that sense, sleep might be the closest most of us come to stepping out of time. Not by breaking any laws of physics, not by travelling faster than light, but by letting go of the constant need to measure, to move, to track. Sleep is a kind of surrender, a nightly disappearance from the river of seconds we normally swim in. What's curious, though, is that we still experience something while we sleep. Not always consciously, but in dreams, in flashes, in sensations too soft to name, the mind remains active. And yet, the normal rules are suspended. Time, inside a dream, does not behave. A single scene can stretch or collapse. A story that feels long can take place in a matter of seconds. You can relive childhood, visit people long gone, skip years in a blink. It doesn't feel linear. It doesn't need to. Dreams don't flow through time. They seem to float within it. And perhaps this is not so different from what we've been exploring all along. If the universe really is a block, if all moments already exist, fixed and eternal, then dreams may offer a strange echo of that truth. In sleep, your mind hops from scene to scene, sometimes without reason, sometimes without awareness. But each fragment feels real, even if it doesn't lead anywhere. Just like the moments in a block universe. Just like you. Existing now, fully, even if you've already existed elsewhere. There's also something beautiful in how sleep rebuilds memory. Studies show that while we sleep, the brain quietly goes about its work, filing, reactivating, reinforcing. Pieces of the day are replayed, rearranged and stored. Some are discarded, some are polished. Without you even knowing, your mind is shaping your identity, your past, your sense of time. So while sleep might feel like an absence, it's also a time of integration, a time when the self is gently rewoven into something whole. And if memory is how we perceive time, if the stitching together of events is what creates the sensation of flow, then sleep might be the space where the stitching happens in silence, where time is no longer a ticking thing, but a quiet unfolding. This leads us to a softer truth. Maybe we don't fall through time at all. Maybe we float in it. That image, the floating, carries something peaceful. It suggests that we're not being dragged helplessly forward by an invisible current, nor stranded somewhere we don't belong. Instead, we drift gently within something larger, cradled by the architecture of space-time, allowed to move, to think, to feel, but never outside the embrace of the whole, like leaves suspended in honey, like stars held in the fabric of the cosmos, like breath resting between heartbeats. And this might be the most important idea of all, not just about time, but about what it means to be conscious, that your experience is not a point flashing and vanishing. It is a shape, a presence. It endures, even if you aren't always aware of it, even if it sleeps, even if it fades. Because in the stillness of time, everything that ever was is still there, not in a museum, not in a vault, but in the soft humming depth of space-time itself. Your first memory, your oldest dream, the moment you laughed until you cried, the quiet minute you sat beside someone saying nothing. They haven't left. You simply aren't touching them right now. But they are there, in the stillness, waiting, like a dream you'll return to. And so, as you rest tonight, you don't need to race ahead or reach back. You don't need to grasp at the clock or fret about what comes next. You can let yourself be held, not by sleep alone, but by time itself, not as a river, not as a threat, but as a presence. And in that presence, perhaps the greatest mystery is not time at all, but attention. Because what you attend to becomes your reality. What you notice, what you remember, what you care about. These shape the feeling of time more than seconds ever could. Your life is not the number of hours you've lived, but the number of moments you've noticed. So maybe time has always been less about motion and more about meaning. And maybe in your stillness, right here, right now, you are closer to the truth of time than you've ever been while rushing through it. And now, here you are, at the quiet end of this long, gentle journey. Not at the end of time, not even at the edge of understanding, just here, still. The room is quieter than when we began, or maybe you are quieter, maybe the same. Sounds are there, the soft hum of the world outside, the distant hush of night, but something in you has settled. Something has let go of the ticking, the rushing, the reaching. You've walked through many ideas tonight, slowly, kindly, not in a hurry to arrive, but just to notice. You've floated beside Einstein's bending space-time. You've stood at the edge of black holes and looked into the mystery. You've wandered the paths of memory, of sleep, of stars. And all along the way, time revealed itself not as a single truth, but as a quiet constellation of ways to feel the world. Somewhere in that you may have felt something soften, not because we solved time, but because we stopped trying to catch it. Because what if time doesn't need to be solved? What if time, like music, like sunlight, like the scent of something familiar, isn't meant to be measured so much as experienced? We often think of ourselves as moving through time, as travellers always in motion, trying to get somewhere, trying to hold on. But tonight, perhaps you can imagine something else. That you are not moving, that you're being held gently in a vast stillness, a quiet architecture of space-time where every moment, every breath, every heartbeat, every laugh and stumble and quiet blink is still there, still shining in its place, like lanterns pinned across a sky. You're one of those lanterns, not a flicker racing past, not a page being turned. You are a moment the universe made, and not just any moment, but this one, this quiet, unhurried moment where you're here, simply being, listening, breathing, wondering. That's enough, because time doesn't need to pass to be real. Presence doesn't need motion to matter, and you, right here, don't need to chase the next second to belong. There's something strangely liberating about that. To realise that you are not behind. You're not too late. You're not running out of time. You're not drifting away from the important parts of your life. You're in them. You're one of them. You're not early. You're not late. You're right where you have always been. The past you loved, the people, the places, the moments, they are not lost. They are part of you. They are stitched into the fabric of your being, and no theory, no entropy, no gravity can take them away. They exist quietly in the corners of your personal space-time, still glowing. The future, too, is not some distant prize to be won. It is already nestled beside you, not to be reached, but to be lived when its moment arrives. And when it does, you will be ready. Not because you've prepared, not because you've earned it, but because it will be yours, and you will be there. And if this moment, this soft, sleeping moment, is the only one you fully notice tonight, that's enough. Because noticing is what brings time to life. You don't have to understand everything. You don't have to hold on to every thought we explored. You can let the questions dissolve now, like stars fading before dawn. Let the metaphors go. Let the theories rest. All you need to keep is this, that time isn't something you're losing. It's something you are. You are the unfolding, the stillness, the story and the silence. You're not separate from the cosmos. You're its rhythm, its pulse, its glowing now. So sleep well, small voyager. You have travelled far without moving. You have asked big questions in the quiet of your own breath. You have wandered among stars, slipped into dreams, peeked at the shape of existence. And now, as your eyes grow heavier, as the world dims into softness, you can let go of needing to know where time begins or ends. You can rest in the simple, lovely truth that you are a moment the universe made, and that moment is still here. Sleep peacefully. Tomorrow is already waiting for you, and in the architecture of time, you have never truly left.